Thank you, Lord Hunt, and thank you all for joining us, and thanks to the GS1 for your kind invitation. Also, thank you very much to Baroness Cumberledge for that excellent introduction to the day. I think we all have a kind of motivation set out for what we want to go through today, and hopefully we can discuss some of the things that we have done to progress some of the challenges that have been put forward in the first Do No Harm report. My name's Kelsey Flott. I'm Deputy Director of Patient Safety in the NHS England Transformation Directorate, or what was a few weeks ago NHS X. And in that role, I'm responsible for implementing the Digital Clinical Safety Strategy, which I think was pointed out as a mouthful to say at the best of times. But I'm going to talk through a bit of that strategy and what it means, what its aims are, also some of the things that we've done to implement the commitments in that strategy, really focusing in on the commitment around traceability and some of our work around electronic point of care traceability, and hopefully, kind of most excitingly, put forward a bit of a plan for how we intend to implement that. But I should say, before coming into the world of digital and digital safety, I worked in patient safety generally and specifically in academic research and policy. And one thing that was very clear in patient safety and trying to achieve safer care on the front line and really see those benefits was that we needed to get policies right, we needed to get processes right, and we needed to inspire the people around us to work for safety. And integral to all of those things was the right data and the right technology and the right infrastructure, which really shows the importance of where digital sits in making care safer. So if I just start on that note around the vision that we have for digital safety in the NHS. We've said for a long time that we want the NHS to be the safest digital health system in the world, but what does that actually look like? So just spend a few minutes talking about what we see as the kind of vision here, and that's really for digital safety to be part of the culture of safer care, so everyone understands their role and responsibility in digital safety, but also that we have clear national and local governance structures for that. We want our safety solutions to be digitally enabled. As we've heard, digital can be the enabler, not the barrier here, and we need, when we're thinking about safer care, to be using our technologies to the fullest. More technically, we need processes to be easy to follow, so when we are risk mitigating digital technologies, those guidance documents are easy to understand, they're targeted and set out to the right people. Individuals need to be equipped and empowered and trained to do digital safety and to work safely with digital technologies. And really crucially, we need decisions to be data-driven. So this is about collecting the right data and using it at the right time to make clinical and operational decisions. Just cutting across all of these principles, or all of these ideas for our vision, are a few principles, and one is around iterative change. And I think it's really important that we don't see patient safety as a static end goal. Making care safer will always be there, and it is responsive and reactive to the needs of the health service at the time. But this is also about openness and collaboration. I think, as we've heard, that at the centre sometimes things can be disjointed, and actually safety needs to be everyone's responsibility, so does digital safety. And inclusion, really importantly, we need to get digital safety right for everyone, not just certain groups, and we need to eliminate the fact that right now our NHS is safer for some people than it is for others. So the Digital Clinical Safety Strategy was published in September, and the reason for that is because it was on World Patient Safety Day, which is a globally recognised day that was set up by the WHO, and I think the NHS did a good job of showcasing the priority it places on digital clinical safety by publishing on that day. And what I think is important, I know one of the themes for the conference over the next 2 days is about alignment of policies at the centre. So just to take a few minutes for those of you who were already familiar with the National Patient Safety Strategy, you might be thinking, why do we have another digital one? And the reason is because we needed a national direction for digital safety and data, especially coming out of the pandemic with the real influx of digital technologies. But what you'll see in the National Patient Safety Strategy is this infrastructure of using insight and involvement as building blocks for improvement and therefore safer systems and safer cultures. Now, we mirror this in the Digital Clinical Safety Strategy for two reasons: to make sure that we're aligned and united, but also because digital safety is just one part of patient safety. Yes, it needs a separate focus, but it's not something separate entirely. So that alignment was really important to us. Also because the Digital Clinical Safety Strategy was a joint publication. So it was published between ourselves, other teams in NHS England, NHS Digital, with significant input from the MHRA, as well as about 200 other stakeholders, some of whom I know are here in the audience. And that collaboration was really important to kind of arrive at two goals, really. And I always think the most important thing about this strategy is the dual aim. And that's first, to improve the safety of digital technologies in health and care now and in the future, but also to identify and promote the use of digital technologies for safety. And we're going to focus on that second piece today, around how we use digital technologies as an enabler to safety, really picking up on traceability. And the strategy has 5 national commitments: one on collecting more data around clinical safety, one around involvement in terms of developing new resources and training materials, also making sure that we have a consolidated resource pool of information for digital safety. Another one around collecting the right evidence base, so we know which technologies make care safer at what time. But it's that commitment 4, which we'll focus on today, around accelerating the use of digital technologies to track implanted medical devices, really picking up on those challenges in the first Do No Harm report. And each of those commitments and everything in the strategy is underpinned by quite a few patient and staff stories. And I want to start with one patient story here, but let me just say at the outset, this is one story. It doesn't reflect all of our patients. It certainly doesn't reflect all that we can do with digital to improve safety. But it is really important in terms of how we use global barcode standards and scanning to improve safety. This example is provided by the Health Safety Investigation Branch, who I know we're hearing from later in the conference. And it's about a routine hip replacement. And the story is actually relatively straightforward. It's not laden with harm and reckless behavior. What it is a gentleman went in for his routine planned hip replacement. The nurse checked the first 2 prostheses that were implanted into the patient. 15 minutes later, checked the next 2. All is standard. But those manual checks did not pick up the fact that the 2 different sets of prostheses were made from different manufacturers. Now, the surgery finished. All of this was then later entered into the National Joint Registry a few days later, and only then was it flagged that those 4 pieces were incompatible and should have never been implanted together. Now, luckily in this case, the patient was informed. There wasn't another procedure necessary, but that's not always the case. We know that often when things like that happen, people can go for years without knowing that anything's gone wrong, and further harm can occur to the patient. Also, this patient did have to then go through quite continuous monitoring to make sure no harm did occur. So this is one of those things that we know could have been prevented. And what the HSIB really helpfully does is put forward some recommendations that are systemic. So they're not just specific to this case, they're about cases like it. And if we focus in on that 5th one, which seems to be numbered 1 right now, they recommended that a barcode scanning system could have strengthened prostheses verification. And I think that's really important for talking about today, because it's one simple thing that could have improved. And actually, in this particular case, that scanning and that barcode would have had to been used at the point of care to stop the error from occurring. And I think the use of these patient stories is not just to bring things to life, it's to remember how many patients this represents. And I think Baroness Cumberledge's report really put these patient stories front and center. And there's more to the report than just thinking about harm. There's actually these major systemic concerns that are raised, and one thing stuck out to me, which is not just about harm or error, but a finding that the healthcare system is disjointed, siloed, unresponsive. It does not adequately recognize that patients are its raison d'etre. Now, that's quite a sobering statement, I think, and I think clearly something that takes a long time to fix, takes collective and collaborative effort to rectify. But I imagine many of us in the audience are thinking, but patients are our raison d'etre. We want patients to be at the center. So there's small things that we can do to meet that bigger picture. And when we start small, it might sound kind of too incremental, but actually, there were really small steps that could have prevented that hip replacement error. And one of those things is around collecting the right data to monitor the safety of medical devices. It's about using global standards to support more efficient data capture. And it's also using that principle of collecting once and using often. So to talk a bit about, well, what have we done in response to that challenge? I'm going to go through some of our electronic point-of-care traceability work. And this work is about using barcode scanning technology to capture and link devices, so that's implanted medical devices as well as consumables, people, so clinicians and patients, and really crucially, location as well, so the theatre that an operation actually took place in. This is collaborative. It's across NHS organisations, clinical scanning technology suppliers, medical device companies, as well as barcode standards bodies. And the point of electronic point-of-care traceability, or ePOCT, as I will call it, is that it collects really valuable data that can improve patient safety. So this is about capturing device data digitally at the point of care. It has benefits associated with tracking Class 2B and 3 medical devices, as highlighted in the first Do No Harm report. And the reason we went for an ePOCT solution to trial and scale up were some of the benefits. We know that there's safety benefits around improved recall, reduction in errors. We also know that there are major financial benefits, so around better stock management, better operational decision-making, and of course, less waste, but also better data collection and more efficient data collection. So you might be thinking, well, this sounds awfully familiar. We have Scan for Safety, and with the spirit of alignment of policies at the centre, I want to take a second to appreciate the groundwork that Scan for Safety laid for this programme. Scan for Safety is a very well-regarded brand that the trusts we work with really trusted and used to set the foundations for their scanning programmes. And what ePOCT does is try to come in and unlock some more of those patient safety benefits, so thinking specifically about point-of-care traceability. And given the kind of trust that the Scan for Safety brand engenders, we're making sure that in the future you'll see a much more united brand between Scan for Safety and ePOCT, directly integrated, which is coming your way kind of later this year. But just to say that lots of the organisations we work with already see the alignment between these two programmes. And there's more alignment from ePOCT as well. So ePOCT supports a number of strategic objectives. First, we talked about the digital clinical safety strategy, but it also supports the Data Saves Lives strategy around making appropriate data collection the norm and not the exception. It also supports the levelling up agenda, which I think is really important because we've clearly seen that there are health inequalities associated with implantable medical devices and how data around them is captured. So the use of scanning for all implantable medical devices will help to address that. ePOCT also supports that broader digitization agenda, which we've heard quite a lot about recently, so enabling interoperable data to be shared between organizations, and specifically interoperable data on implantable medical devices, which is crucial to that traceability piece. Now, I think hearing about our ePOCT pilots is best done from some of the organizations who have participated in the pilot. So if this video plays, I'd like you to hear their voice for a minute.
The Scan for Safety project was a South West London collaboration that was instigated around about 2 years ago.
There's twofold opportunities, I think, with Scan for Safety. First and foremost, the pretty obvious one around stock management and wastage. And then again, of course, you've got the patient safety angle with expired stock.
In terms of patient safety, the traceability is fundamental, because if you have some sort of implant, you need to know exactly when was that used, when did they apply, which batch, which lots, which number. So that is very important. If there is an incident raised about some equipment or something that is used on patients, we can also trace exactly on the list, on the day, who used it.
We will know exactly what we've done for each patient, what we've used for each patient, which means that if anything does go wrong, we can find out what batch number, etc., and issue a call out to the NHS to say, keep an eye on this. The patient will come into the theatre and then the barcodes will be scanned for both the patient so that all the data that's collected gets allocated to the patient. In the theatre, the nursing staff, the packs that we use to treat the patient are scanned, including clinicians and anyone who's actually related to the patient care for that patient. The idea is that all aspect of the patient journey and the clinical input to the patient is scanned at the point of delivery.
The system will help the trust save money by reducing the amount of product wastage, because I think human behaviour, when you know it's being tracked in a clinical setting, I think there's less likely to be wastage, far less overstocking.
The quality of information obviously is much better than what we're used to previously. For example, in our stock management and our patient level costing, where predominantly it was based on an apportionment methodology, but now it's based on actual drugs, consumables, and even theatre time and clinician time. We've got that real granular level of detail that we need, and fundamentally, the fantastic thing about Scan for Safety is it's clinical-led information rather than financial-led information, so it's owned by the clinicians, and therefore you can get into really meaningful conversations about how we can use that information to make better decisions rather than conversing about whether the data is accurate or it's relevant.
My personal view is Scan for Safety, or the principle of scanning, is a no-brainer. It is a fantastic, simple tool to take on board. We don't even know the full extent of the benefits that we'll get from it, except that more data about patient care is better than less. And my personal view is that it will allow us to control costs a bit better, plus actually see the patient pathway in a slightly broader light rather than just treating them clinically, to actually see the whole of the amount of work, background, time, effort that actually goes into providing care for one patient.
I think the way forward has got to be this. I think it's a win-win situation for everybody, particularly, of course, the patient.
So thanks for listening to that. I think that hearing from the front line and hearing what the benefits that this can have from our frontline colleagues is actually probably the most powerful, and you can hear their kind of plea for more point of care data that makes kind of these benefits possible. Just to give you a flavour of what this programme looked like, so we started with 27 organisations and conducting interviews with them, and that started to unlock some of the information around how we get more organisations doing point of care traceability scanning, and things like stakeholder buy-in, the program management that's needed around it, the kind of procurement that's needed to do this work as well. But we also worked with 30 medical device suppliers, as well as 8 scanning technology suppliers. And between them and our interview sites, we started to learn a bit more about what we can share with other organizations who want to do this. So the feasibility of scanning, what can be scanned, who can do the scanning, and what sort of training and skills are needed. All of these things are really kind of tools in our toolkit for scaling this work up. We had then pilots that we moved to we had 5 main pilots, as well as a couple kind of learning sites that we worked with the whole time to really use point of care scanning to enable some more patient safety benefits. So just to show a bit of a distribution of who we did work with, it wasn't those kind of final pilots that were the main ones who gave us information about scanning. It was also from those interviews where we understood not just the benefits this could have, but some of the barriers to becoming an electronic point of care traceability site as well. And one of the things we were talking about earlier is how do we get everyone doing this? How do we kind of make this the norm? And what we found from our interviews was some of the information around the barriers and facilitators across the country to improving uptake. And this journey is really crucial, and we can't expect it to happen overnight. There's a context in which ePOCT happens, and that has to do with digital maturity, it has to do with funding, and it has to do with the priorities and the pressure that the NHS is under right now as well. And what we also need to think about in patient safety is we often tend to use really binary metrics of were there fewer incidents, was there less harm, was there more scanning? And actually, we need to kind of think about this more as a journey. Some organizations are right there at that awareness point, and we need to bring them more into the fold and build awareness. Then we need to work to interest and buy-in to really cut through some of those priorities to make sure point of care traceability is prioritized within an organization. Lots of organizations also have scanning, but not point of care scanning, so we can really facilitate the next step. And even our point of care scanning organizations need to be able to use their data and link their data in the right ways to really optimize benefits. So we'll talk about that pathway quite a lot. Of course, not linear in reality. And a few notes on the actual benefits that we did find. And my colleague Phil will be talking about this more in a session later this afternoon, where we'll dive into some of the case studies around ePOCT and what the individual organizations found. But there were measurable benefits, both for safety and for funding and efficiency. That staff adoption piece, which we've talked about, is doable when you get the right people in the right room. And the technology does work. So I think we've already heard this a couple of times today. This isn't a technical challenge. This is about a people and process challenge. So we'll hear a lot more about these pieces this afternoon in some of the detail. But also just to say that these benefits maximize over time. So when we first see an organization implement an ePOCT solution, we see those efficiency gains start to kick in. And once the solution is more embedded in the organization, we start to see some of those efficiency benefits expand into patient safety benefits. And then kind of once it's fully established and is the norm in an organization, we can see better care and more accurate kind of implant tracking and some of those more profound patient safety benefits. Of course, we've also seen barriers in our work as well. And we've learned that one thing that was important was this wasn't just about cost. Actually, one of the big things is around awareness and buy-in. And sometimes generating that enthusiasm and awareness amongst senior executives is difficult, which is why at the centre we're providing a toolkit that has template business cases and information that can be lifted and picked up in any organisation to help generate that senior level buy-in. Also, we know that ePOCT needs electronic patient records. Not every organisation has a fully functioning electronic patient record, although with the Secretary of State announcement earlier this month, we do expect that to expand considerably over the next year. And then there's a challenge around the product information master, or the catalogue of all medical devices matching to their barcode. And right now we know that the strategy for developing a PIM is different across different organisations. Again, Phil will be picking up on this in much more detail about how we actually generate a more united PIM to support organisations. But one thing we do know is that the benefits that we're seeing from ePOCT and from Scan for Safety are huge, and we need to make sure that we do scale this up. And yes, there's a journey for trusts to go on, but we need to be accelerating that journey. And we want this to be led by trusts, so that trusts can select locally relevant solutions for their own organisations, that trusts can kind of self-serve and pick things that work for them. But we also want to make sure that this is centrally enabled and centrally coordinated. So their roles at the centre, this is not just NHS England, it's ourselves in partnership with NHS Digital, MHRA, NHS Supply Chain, to really have a coordinated approach to making the uptake of an ePOCT or scanning solution more readily available for any organisation. You'll see this start with some coordinated resources and assets, and as well as a more kind of national engagement team to help organisations start this journey or continue on this journey. So to kind of give you a flavour of what's coming, in terms of resources, those template business cases, as well as some articulation on benefits, on communications, on information governance, as well as some IT support, we've found will help organisations be able to start this up. Now, we also will have some more engagement, and what this engagement allows is to showcase some of the best practice and learnings that we've found from the ePOCT work, but also to explain more on a one-to-one basis and tackle some of those kind of trust-specific challenges that organisations might come with that can't be covered in the sort of lift and shift business case templates. So that's all coming your way, and we'd be really interested to kind of get some more feedback on that and thoughts. But I think just to conclude and draw this together, we do know that there's a strategy in the NHS around digital safety and a priority placed on using digital technologies to enable safety. One piece of research coming out of the pandemic shows that when people think about the legacy of technology after the pandemic, it's not just about how well the tech works. People want to know, is it safe and can it enable safer care? So we think that it can. We think that our patients are showing that it can. We think that the first Do No Harm report really calls us to action to make sure that we do this. So we hope that with kind of local interest and local support, as well as national commitment to this, we can work together and take a few steps closer to really putting patients back at the heart and making patients our raison d'etre. Thank you.
Kelsey, that was fascinating. Thank you very much. And it was great to see the link between Julia's report and the implementation of ePOCT. And clearly there are great things going to happen in the future. So if I could ask Kelsey, Julia, and our other panellists to come and join me, we're going to move into a discussion. Thanks.